Hello everyone, and let's talk about Resident Evil 7. This channel is becoming a Resident Evil channel. I've got Resident Evil on the brain, haven't I? Got a Resi 4 video coming soon as well. So we're going to talk about, is Resident Evil 7 a proper Resident Evil game? Now, someone who's been playing Resident Evil for, the best part of 20 years. My first Resident Evil was Resident Evil 2 back on the PS1 days. That's where I started. I finished every main Resident Evil game with the exception of 6. Okay, I just couldn't do Chris's campaign. Sorry, it was just awful. It was the worst Gears of War knockoff I'd ever seen. Finished it in co-op. Finished Leon and the other dude whose name I can't remember. It was Sherry Birkin was the other woman that was with the girl that was with him. I know her because she was in Resi 2, but I don't remember that dude's name. He's such a memorable character that I don't remember. I don't remember a lot about 6. I remember there was a helicopter thing, and then you were in a town with zombies. You were in a park with zombies, and then you were, what else were you? You fought a dinosaur thing at the end. I remember that. But yeah, 6 was forgettable. The only reason I finished it twice, the 2 campaigns, was co-op. So I would argue Resident Evil 6 wasn't really a proper Resident Evil game. Same with Resi 5. It really ditched the horror. Resi 7 brings back the horror. It brings back that sort of closed-in feeling of being kind of helpless. And that's what you want from a horror game. You want that survival element pushed to the front. Now, you don't need stamina bars and hunger meters for survival games. I don't think you really need that. What you need is a sense of dread, and that's what it brings, okay? You don't know what's around the corner. I would say structurally it's very similar to the first game. The first 2 games, at least in the series, very, very similar to that. Okay, you still got the puzzles, you still got the keys. I mean, for example, you've got like the snake key, the scorpion key. I mean, that's just ripped straight from Resident Evil 1. You had like it was like the pieces of a knight, so you'd have armor, shield, sword keys. Resident Evil 2, it was cards, so you would have clubs, club key, heart key, diamond key, things like that. So you had the spade key was the other one. So you've got kind of things like that are mixed in. You've got like the to get out of the first door, the first sort of major door that you come across at the house, you have to put 3 Cerberus heads in. I call them Cerberus because 3-headed dog. Very reminiscent of like the crest. You had like the wind crest, the star crest, and things like that in Resident Evil 1. And as someone who played Resident Evil 1 recently, I played through it for my video, Resident Evil in 2017, which you can check out. As someone who played through that recently, I think it's pretty similar. The structure is very much the same. Now, a lot of people say the first-person perspective is the same. What, a game can't change perspective all of a sudden? It's still very, very similar. You can move and shoot this time. But bear in mind that a lot of that perspective and the fixed camera perspective at the time was due to technical limitations. So they had to have a fixed camera, pre-rendered backgrounds, so of course the camera couldn't really track with you. Nowadays you can have a fully rendered 3D world nowadays. PS1 back in 1996, you couldn't really have that, so pre-rendered backgrounds were a good way of kind of getting round that graphical limitation. I thought so. Yeah, the fixed camera angle did create a sense of dread, and that's how they created it back in 96. However, it's 2017, even in 2005, there you go. Resident Evil 4 again changed the perspective to that of a third-person shooter. Playing through that at the moment, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the changes. I think a game should never stay too much the same. It's good that they change, and it's good that a series evolves. Otherwise, you end up with Assassin's Creed or Call of Duty or any other Ubisoft game that you would mention. I would rather have that, a series that at least pushes the game in a new direction. And I like the first-person perspective. It is kind of the 2017. It does get claustrophobia that we're talking about, sort of this sort of new generation type thing, and it does work pretty well. If you played games like Condemned, Criminal Origins, that was a really good sort of horror first-person shooter. Came out with the Xbox 360. It was an Xbox 360 launch title. quite different. It was more of a first person, melee game. But, you know, similar presentation and had a similar horror theme. Now, I do love the sort of Baker family. I call them the Fritzl family. They're pretty good. I mean, they remind me a lot of Mr. X / Nemesis. I mean, Nemesis was an iconic villain. They always show up when it's inconvenient. You do want to avoid them. You can sort of take them on, but you can't really kill them. It is best to avoid them. Now, how you avoid them was you use stealth. Okay, it's slightly different, but it works. You know, you hide from them. I mean, you spent most of Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2 avoiding most of the zombies. It's just a different method of avoiding them this time. Again, evolution. They can break through walls. They can break through doors and things like that. It used to be, again, that was a technical limitation on the sort of PS1, Dreamcast PCs of the time. Was again, the zombies couldn't really go through doors and things like that. I mean, eventually Resident Evil 3, Nemesis could go through doors. But yeah, avoiding enemies has always been part of Resident Evil, and it's just a different technique. You just gotta hide, you just gotta use a bit of stealth. Again, it's very similar to Alien Isolation, I guess. I guess they're taking cues from that. Yeah, I mean, they're taking the cues, I guess, from that. Sorry that there's a lot of pauses in the video. I have a sore throat at the moment, so apologies for that. But I think it is a Resident Evil game. It certainly is. It's puzzle, it's mission structure, if you want to call it that. You know, it does escalate as you go on. You do fight more and more enemies. You do find the weapons are very traditional Resident Evil as well. You've got melee weapons, which is new to the game. And I guess that is, you know, that is the way that, you know, VR is the new thing that it wants to take advantage of. And it certainly does that. I don't have a PlayStation VR. I don't even have the PS4 version. I bought mine on PC. So, I mean, apparently it's really good in VR. Apparently it's not very scary. But just because it's not scary doesn't mean it's not doesn't have a horror theme to it. I mean, it's tense, I would say. You know, you're always on edge. But you're never really scared playing it. I never really have nightmares after playing it or anything like that. But you do kind of dread what's around the corner and things like that. And it makes you think about things. You know, where am I going? You know, is there a dude going to appear? They all seem to appear at the least convenient time, the family. And I like them. They're an interesting lot of antagonists. I mean, yes, you could argue it's the storyline wise, it doesn't have a huge amount to do with the previous games in the series. I haven't really played too far into the story, so maybe you'll get more experience. But bear in mind, Resident Evil 6, the story is as convoluted as you would have liked. I mean, the story was just awful in the end. The story was just going nowhere. After Wesker died, it's like, yeah, I kind of felt the series should have wrapped up around then. It just got more and more ridiculous after that. So it is refreshing to go back and have a fresh perspective. Some people say, should they have called it Resident Evil 7? Shouldn't they have just called it Resident Evil? I'd say no. It's too confusing now, because there's two games that are called Resident Evil. You've got the original in 1996, and you have the remake. Okay, we already covered this in that video, how many versions of Resident Evil there are. Don't call it Resident Evil. Please don't, because there's too many games called that. Resident Evil 7. Interestingly enough, it's called Resident Evil 7 Biohazard in Europe and the US, and in Japan it's called Biohazard 7 Resident Evil. Quite interesting, they've reversed it. Obviously it's called Biohazard in Japan, but it's good that they've mixed in the Japanese and the Western title in the same game, even though they flipped it. I think that's pretty cool. But overall, I like it. I like the atmosphere. I think it's pretty good. I like the return to the puzzle-based nature of the game. One of the things I said in my Resident Evil retrospective video is that they just didn't make games like that these days. And I'm glad they've gone back to that style with the puzzles, with the way they you unlock new areas, and it does have backtracking in the game, but I think it's handled quite well. I think they've handled it well. I like the little VHS tape side quests as well. I think they're pretty cool. They just give you a different take on what's going on. I think they're interesting. It's weird that it's VHSs. I thought it was like set in the 90s or something, because they had like a tape recorder and a VHS. No, it's set in 2017. It's like the family are just backwards. for some reason. Maybe, I don't know, they just don't move on with technology. It's like tape recorder is your safe thing. I suppose it's better than, you know, the 18th century typewriters, I suppose, that you used, or the 18th, was it the typewriter was around in the 18th century, was it, or was it the 19th century? I don't remember. I'm not a typewriter history buff, to be honest. I think it was it 18th or 19th century the typewriter came out. I don't know. Don't ask me. Someone Google it for me. I can't be arsed Googling it, to be honest with you. So use the typewriter, so at least it's moved on to the 20th century. We could agree that tape recorders were an invention of the 20th century at least. So maybe next time you'll get something in the 21st century. Maybe clouds. You use cloud data. Cloud sync. That's what you'll do. Go in and cloud sync it. No, in fact, you have to move on to, like, you go from tapes to, I guess, maybe hard drives. Maybe, because you say CDs, but you can only burn a CD once. You know, CDs and DVDs, you can only burn them once. So I'm guessing a hard drive, and then it'll be cloud, and then it'll be just implanted into your brain, I guess, is next. Use the human mind, because it has infinite storage, really. But there you go, that's an interesting little thing that they moved on from whatever century typewriters were invented into the 20th century with tape recorders. But anyway, that is all for this video. I am ranting on a bit now. But overall, I like Resident Evil 7. I think it is a return to form. As someone who didn't really like 5 and hated 6, it's good that they've tried something different now, and at least got out of that Call of Duty Uncharted clone rut that they were in. They're not Gears of War, they're not Uncharted, they're not Call of Duty. It's Resident Evil, and that's what Resident Evil 7 is. It's a return to being Resident Evil. And that is all for this video, so thank you for joining me. We'll see you again soon, and goodbye.